Well, let me tell you something, brother.
Snort, snort, snort.
Kogan. Drip.
Snort, snort.
I got the drip. Go. Alright, well, would you like my final verdict? I mean, I've said a lot about the game over the course of the game as I played it. My final verdict is thus. Okay? This is a perfectly fine, passable RPG. It is. It's fine. But, for me, my personal taste, it's too easy. The gameplay, you know, starts off like it's going to be way more complex and ends up being so simplistic about halfway through. Once you start get all the icons unlocked, it's so easy. I mean, and every icon's the same. Every icon has an area of effect attack, an ultimate attack, some kind of a move that'll teleport or block, and you don't even really use it that much. Once you start unlocking basic combat stuff, it's just so easy, you know. And that was the harder difficulty. You know, you can't unlock the Final Fantasy difficulty until you finally beat it. So, what's left if the combat is simplistic? Well, there's the icon battles. Those are all right. They're cinematic, but there's really not much to those either. Like, what are you gonna do? Fail them? How exactly? You know what I mean? They're so easy. So then you say, okay, what about the story? The story's all right. It's not bad. The core story of, you know, these people who control magic that'll call bearers, and then you've got the dominants that control these super creatures called icons and everything that previously were summoned monsters, but now they're called icons or whatever. It's an interesting take for sure, and a different, like, I was actually immersed in the lore of the game for the whole first like 10 hours. I thought it was very interesting, but for me, the game is just so full of so many shortcomings. Number one, and this has to be said, it's a PlayStation 5 exclusive, and it chops up all the time with the frame rate. That's just stupid. I mean, I like the graphical detail, but the fact that the frame rate can't hold a steady 60 is ridiculous. It's a console exclusive. Work your ass off and make it run well on the console. That's stupid as shit. Just that alone is a big detriment. That's like, wow, that's the first sign when you start playing the game and you see the frame rates dipping. You're like, all right, sign of things to come. And it just continues with this pattern of greatness that could have been achieved, but it just flops on its face. The long-windedness of the dialogue, the over-pretentiousness of the dialogue is stupid as shit. Whoever wrote the dialogue literally needs to fucking go back to school. It's so boring. I don't want to sit here and listen to you blab about nonsensical shit that has nothing to do with the plot. You say, oh, it's world building. Yeah, but it's boring world building. The whole point of building a world is the world's interesting. The world's not interesting outside of the main plot. It's boring as dirt. I don't want to deliver gruel to some fucking townsperson. I don't want to find your comb lost in the fucking weeds out there. I don't give two shits about your bullshit. It's boring. The plot itself is way too long-winded. They could have easily abridged this game and made it a 20-hour game, and it would have been a much better game than the 40 hours required to beat it. For example, there's times when this game forces you to do insanely boring filler. Why do I have an exciting boss fight and then immediately I have to play 2 hours of walk around and collect items, fight generic enemies, and none of it adds to the plot whatsoever? It's literally filler content. Because they didn't know how to pace the game. They had a 20-hour plot and had nothing else to do. So they padded it with shit that's so boring and time-wasting, you get bored. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be bored playing Final Fantasy. I was legit bored with this game. I can't even say that. I played Final Fantasy 15, Final Fantasy 13, maybe in Final Fantasy 13, in the first world-building segments. Like, that whole first 15, 20 hours, the game's very linear. But the moment the game opens up, it gets really interesting. This game, you've seen it all once you've played for about 10 hours. You know what the whole game is, and it's fucking boring. That's sad. They really needed a better director. And I'm sorry, because I know people love the director of this game because he did Final Fantasy 14. He knows how to do MMOs. The game had MMO pacing in a single-player RPG. It doesn't work. It's boring. I shouldn't be sitting here bored to tears because you fucking are wasting half of my stream time. I'm streaming 3-hour segments and 90 minutes. I would rather be doing anything else than playing your game. You failed making a good game. And they did. This game, I'm sorry, is not as good as any mainline Final Fantasy that I've played and completed. Now, there's a few I haven't completed. Final Fantasy VIII is always my most hated, and I never went back to replay it. Maybe I will one day. I've actually heard Final Fantasy X-2 is quite bad. I don't know because I've never played it. I heard it was a spin-off. It was nothing like the original 10, and people really detested it, all right? And I'll even go to say, Final Fantasy 13-2 isn't as good as the first, but it's good. Final Fantasy 13-3 is abysmal, all right? I will say Final Fantasy 13-3 is worse than this game. That I will admit, okay? But I think everyone kind of agreed Final Fantasy 13-3 really sucked, okay? This one is a shame. It's the mainline game, and it's bad. That's not good. This isn't the sequel, the spin-off. The mainline game is boring as dirt. That's not good. And one other thing that, yes, we should say, this game really suffered an identity crisis because you could tell all they wanted to do was bite off of everyone else's ideas. The plot is incredibly Game of Thrones-esque. It's got to have swear words, it's got to have gore, and it's got to have sex. Why? What did any of those things add to the game? Zero. First Final Fantasy to have adult ratings, and it didn't do anything with them at all. It squandered the opportunity to do something unique, right? Big boss fights are okay, but they've been done before. All the creatures look like they're summoned monsters, but really they're fucking kaijus from Godzilla. In fact, a lot of them look like kaijus from Godzilla. They look like they just reskinned them, right? The gameplay, stolen from other games. Similar to Devil May Cry, similar to other franchises, and it does it poorly. It's not even as good as the franchises it's trying to bite off of. It takes all these elements from other games and tapes it together to make a whole. The whole is coherent, but it's also incredibly boring, badly paced, super repetitive, not fun. It's a failure. This is a failure of a mainline Final Fantasy game. There's so many things they could have improved, and all they needed was someone in that room with the director to say, I'm sorry, you did a good job with 14, you're fucking this up. This is not what people want from this game. You gotta stop and do some things and elements that are going to make it more interesting. But it sounds like they gave all the creative control to this one guy just because he did a good MMO, and it doesn't work as a single-player outing. It just doesn't. This game is poorly paced, poorly designed, bad combat, really boring pacing. Just cut out, if you cut out 80% of the game, you've got something good there, but then you got to add in more elements to make it a full game. It's just, it fails. I am so disappointed with this game. And by the way, I went into this game with no preconceived notions of what it was. I didn't watch the gameplay trailers. I didn't watch the expose. Nothing. I just fucking played it at face value. And it sucks at face value. It really does. I'm sorry. It just is nowhere near as good as what you would expect from Final. And there's the real shame. It's Final Fantasy 16. It's not Final Fantasy spin-off quest. Like, remember last year we had Strangers of Fortune, or whatever the fuck it was called, Strangers of Virtue, Strangers of Fortune, Dr. Strangelove, whatever it was called last year. That one wasn't as good, but at least it was a spin-off title. This is the main game, and it wasn't good. That sucks, because now you've tarnished the actual name of the real franchise. A numbered outing sucks. That's not good, man. I think what they need to do is go back to the drawing board. They need to go back and say, what made Final Fantasy great? Was it simply just having chocobos and moogles and crystals and this iconic piece of music and this creature that we recognize? No. This series had core elements that made it great. This game was just tossed all those elements away to be something different, and it fails. It's time to go back to the core elements that made it a good game, because this game was nowhere near as good as most of the Final Fantasies I've played. I mean, right before I played Final Fantasy 16, I played Final Fantasy 5 Pixel Remaster. That game's like 10 times better than this game. If they're smart, they're going to say, all right, enough with the whole, we got to buy into modern audiences, you know. Go back and make a good Final Fantasy again. It's funny because they're contemporaries. Take a look at Yakuza Like a Dragon. That franchise went from action-based to turn-based RPG and proved that a good turn-based RPG can still succeed in the modern day. This game said, oh, we can't do that anymore. We got to modernize everything. And the game sucks ass. They went completely the opposite direction and fucking fell off the edge. Seriously, like, what a disappointment for me. Wow. Seriously, you can still take elements from your franchise of the past and make something new. You don't have to abandon everything from the past and say, oh, now it's a modern game. That's it. It was a cop-out. It was literally a cop-out, and it's a shame. I think this plot would have worked in a better game. The plot, the main plot lines, the ideas that, okay, you know, the world's being controlled by this force in the background or whatever, and then you find out it's aliens or whatever that came from another world or whatever. That, it works. It's just terrible, terrible execution on the game. Super disappointing. Can't believe it. Literally can't believe this is what they came up with. Because as I kept playing, I kept saying, okay, the better part's coming, right? And people were like, no, actually, this is the whole game. What? Really? This is the whole game? Anyway. So yeah, guys, I'm sorry I didn't like it. A lot of people loved it. A lot of people saying it's their game of the year. I don't know. To different strokes for different folks. If you had called this not Final Fantasy 16, I actually said this during the game. I said, what if they called it Iconic Kingdom, right? It's the battle of the kingdoms and their icons against each other. And it had nothing to do with Final Fantasy, but you called it Iconic Kingdom, right? Then at least it would make more sense. It's its own thing. Calling this Final Fantasy is just a fucking way to try to cash in on the Final Fantasy name. This is not Final Fantasy. It's not. It's another game with a bunch of creatures from Final Fantasy and the music. It's not Final Fantasy. This guy fucked it up. So they're gonna have to basically earn back the trust of people before they buy the next one. Because this one, you know, and again, we don't even know how it did sales-wise. We know that it sold a lot of copies pre-ordered, but we haven't heard anything yet. I'd be curious how many people bought it after the fact of the pre-orders. Because once you saw what the game was, like, what the hell is this? There's nothing Final Fantasy in here, right? So, anyway, that's my take. Again, it's not a terrible game. It's not a non-functional game. It's just boring. And you don't want boring out of Final Fantasy. That's incredibly disappointing that they made a game so goddamn boring. You know what I mean? So, alright. That's it. I want to say thank you to everyone who joined me for the playthrough and endured. Because, man, it was endurance to get through it. That's for sure. People were actually, no exaggeration, and this never happens. People were begging me to stop playing this game about 20 hours in. And I said, nah, we invested 20 hours. I bought it. I want to see it to the end. So, man, when you people are begging you, it's like something went wrong here, okay? Anyway, again, thank you all. I appreciate you. Thanks for watching. See you for the next epic RPG playthrough, whenever that may be. Hopefully Final Fantasy 17 does something better than this. Peace out.
I got the drip going. 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 I got the drip going.
It's like a faucet that's dripping. You can't make it stop.
So what do you want me to do? Have a mute button that every second I'm tapping the mute button just in case I'm gonna have to clear? Like, this is what I mean. These dumb kids. This is what it is. It's dumb kids.